Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this video and talk about this subject because I thought that it would probably be most appropriate at this situation. And for those of you, of course, that did not hear about the NBA playoffs, the Denver Nuggets were successful in eliminating LeBron James and the LA Lakers, I believe, within that of 5 games. Of course, with Denver going 3-0 in the series, and then the Lakers winning game 4, I believe. And then, of course, Denver winning it back home, which in my view was a very necessary win for them because had they allowed the Lakers to have game 6 on their home court, that was a series that they very much potentially could have lost. And if that series would have went to 7 games, I'm not really quite sure had the Denver Nuggets really been able to pull out of that one. Because the Denver Nuggets really don't look quite as dominant nor as fresh this season as what they did last season. But we'll see where they go. Because that Minnesota Timberwolves series, they're definitely going to be a huge threat. But we'll see where that goes. But anyways, of course, for this conversation, this has been a conversation, especially if you're around my age, around the age, anywhere from your early 20s to your latter 20s, maybe even early 30s. You've been hearing about this conversation for a very long time, especially if you grew up throughout the 2010s like I did and was a teenager, or if you were a teenager throughout that time, you know that this LeBron James versus Michael Jordan conversation about who is the greatest player of all time, that has been raging on for a very long time. Now, of course, a certain amount of people would ask, does this Denver Nuggets series prove that LeBron James is not the greatest of all time over Michael Jordan? And I would state no, because I think that there's plenty of things that prove that LeBron James is not the GOAT over that of Michael Jordan. But the reason why I wanted to review this video especially is because this is going to be a video, I believe, on the TFU Podcast, or That's Fucked Up Podcast. And this, of course, is going to be a debate between a LeBron James fan with that of Ryan Davis, who I believe is going to be on the left, and of course between that of two Michael Jordan fans. And let me tell you what, just in my personal view, if you're asking me who do I believe is the greater player of the two, I think that obviously is clearly Michael Jordan. To be honest with you, I really don't think that it's much of a conversation. To be honest with you, just in my personal view, I don't think that LeBron James really should be involved in the GOAT conversation whatsoever. I don't think that LeBron is on the same level as Michael Jordan. I don't think he's on the same level as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I also don't think he's on the same level as Bill Russell. I don't think that, in my view, that you're really that deserving of being in the GOAT conversation when you have less MVPs, less defensive awards than all those players, less championships than every single one of those players. LeBron James fans, of course, they like to go to a lot of accumulative statistics, and they like to go to a lot of, on the surface statistics. But of course, they never like to talk about the major accomplishments, but it is what it is. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I kind of wanted to get my perspective out there about the Michael Jordan, LeBron James conversation, and LeBron also, in my view, I just don't see him in the GOAT conversation. And not only do I not see him there, but in my view, LeBron is not really within the same realm as those players. Where he really is, in my view, is that he's in the same realm with Larry Bird. He's in the same realm with Tim Duncan and Will Chamberlain. That's where LeBron James is, in my view. And I'll create cases for all those players as well as to why I believe they're along the same level. But in my view, LeBron James, no, he cannot be on the same level as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, someone that has more championships, more MVPs, more defensive accolades. No, he can't be over Bill Russell, who not only has more championships, even if you were to give him half credit for the era, because there was only 8 teams, but he has more MVPs. He was probably the greater defensive player out of the two of them. Really not much of a conversation, and on top of that, you could argue that he was more impactful in terms of winning. All right, and of course, that's not even talking about Magic Johnson, who I would also have over LeBron James. But we'll talk about that as the video goes along. But this is going to be a video, once again, by the TFU Podcast. Ryan Davis, who is on the left here, is going to make a certain amount of points that I believe are somewhat valid overall, but unfortunately a lot of the Michael Jordan fanboyism from these other two guys, because they didn't have enough of an intelligent debate or conversation with this guy. Ryan Davis came across as a guy that was much more informed than what he really actually was. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's state overall what they have to say.
Do you really believe LeBron is the GOAT? Because I watched it and I was disturbed. I want to know
What point did I make that wasn't valid?
No, they're all valid points.
That's all the point I wanted to make.
The funniest one is when you talked about who Michael Jordan was playing against.
Well, it's no offense against this dude right here, who in my view, overall, it's no offense against this guy, but to be honest, this guy kind of comes across as a pea brain. This guy right here really had no arguments whatsoever as to prove why Michael Jordan is the greater player over LeBron James. It's the regular, overall, he had a greater killer instinct and all that stuff, but they have no other debates to bring to the table. And if you truly know basketball and also the player that Michael Jordan was, throughout his career, there's a dozen different arguments that you could debate that Michael Jordan is greater over LeBron James. But when he stated overall that I was disturbed, basically what that comes across as is that you're basically just a Michael Jordan fan that worships the land that he walks on. And that's why a lot of LeBron James fans and media members like Nick Wright, Colin Cowherd, and Shannon Sharp, they're gaining a lot of ground because a lot of Michael Jordan fans, to be honest with you, they don't really have a great reason in their mind as to why Michael Jordan is the greatest over LeBron James. They just want it to be like that because Michael Jordan was their favorite basketball player. So that's why a lot of LeBron James fans get a lot of ground because a lot of these idiots, they don't really know overall, once again, how to counter some of these points. But anyways, let's get into it.
And I was sitting there, I was like, he was like, yeah, they were starters too. I was like, that's true. They were starters, nigga.
Or in a second.
But you really don't think Michael Jordan's the GOAT?
I think Michael Jordan is amazing. I think Jordan fans are just lying about what it is. He was a nigga who was before his time. Congratulations.
He's definitely before his time.
And what Ryan Davis is basically trying to allege there is that Michael Jordan, of course, was facing off against weak competition. Once again, the 90s, by the way, was not a time where you had super teams like what the 80s did, or overall kind of like what the 2010s did, like when LeBron James, formed the Cleveland Cavaliers, or when the Warriors, added Kevin Durant to their team, or some other teams like the 2008 Boston Celtics. That wasn't that time. What the 90s was a team to where it was a lot like the Denver Nuggets that you see currently, where there was probably one superstar on the team, and there were some other star potential players on the team, where they could have been labeled as all-stars, but maybe they'd either make it or maybe they wouldn't. That pretty much was the team. It wasn't a mega super team era like the 80s or like that maybe later on in the 2010s. It just wasn't like that. Michael Jordan, when you take a look at throughout his career with the Chicago Bulls, many people, of course, try to state that he had the greatest amount of talent ever. Like LeBron James fans, they legit will try to debate with you that Michael Jordan had the most amount of help ever. And for those of us that know shit about the Chicago Bulls and basketball, we know that, of course, that is not true. Michael Jordan really only had one all-star player throughout his whole entire career to work with, and that was mainly Scottie Pippen. Now, of course, did he have other great players, to add to the piece? Yes, of course. But once again, this also needs to be talked about because a lot of people take a look at the 90s teams and they're like, oh, well, those teams were garbage, just because maybe some of the guys didn't always make all-star teams or because they don't know who those players were. But for example, if we take a look at the Nikola Jokic-led Denver Nuggets team, a lot of people right now would call that team a super team, when in all reality, that team is not a super team. Nikola Jokic actually is the only all-star on that team. Jamal Murray has never made an all-star appearance. Michael Porter Jr. has never made an all-star appearance. Aaron Gordon has never made an all-star appearance. So does that mean that Nikola Jokic is on a team filled with bums? Is that what that means? Does that all of a sudden make Nikola Jokic the most valuable player ever? Because he's not leading all-star level players according to the finals? Or does it mean that maybe his teammates, that it doesn't always matter when you take a look at some of those things, that sometimes a team can be a little bit more talented than what it is indicated. And when you talk about some of the Jordan teams that he faced off against, those are teams that had sometimes like 3 to 5 all-star potential players. But we'll get into that as it goes along.
LeBron James is first overall in scoring.
Because if we're going to go there, LeBron James in this most recent series against the Nuggets, he had more all-stars on his team than what Nikola Jokic did, if we're going to go by those standards. Because everyone knows who AD is, everyone knows who LeBron James is. But, in 20, 30 years from now, are we going to remember Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and Aaron Gordon on the same level? Because remember, they haven't made any all-star teams. Does that mean that those guys are bums?
Fourth all-time in assists.
But he played 5 more years than Jay.
Is that why
that's his fault?
Is that why he has...
That's not his fault. One thing I'll tell you about LeBron, physical fitness, was his thing, and he wanted to play as long
played
as he possibly could.
He played longer, but he
Didn't retire
but he has a
midway.
higher shooting percentage too.
Y'all tripping.
He has
Well, LeBron James does have a higher shooting percentage, ever so slightly over Michael Jordan. But when you talk about really the context, I mean, you can give LeBron James that point if you really want to. But LeBron James really was not a greater offensive player than Michael Jordan. To be honest with you, he really wasn't greater than Michael Jordan, really in almost any category. I would give LeBron James maybe. I mean, if you wanted to give him the slight edge, of course, in passing, maybe. But to be honest with you, they're probably about on the same level in terms of a passer. It's just that Michael Jordan, once the triangle offense was established, he wasn't asked to play the point guard. See, the thing is with LeBron James is that he leads in every single one of these statistics because LeBron plays in a very ball-dominant system, and he wants to try to play the point guard as well as the small forward as well as the center. Like LeBron James basically wants to be everything to everybody on the team. And when you do that, yeah, you're going to lead in every single statistic and put up great statistical performances. But your team is going to be severely marginalized for that because it's going to limit their danger ability within the game. That's why eventually when the Detroit Pistons, when, they faced Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan played in a very similar style that was a little bit more ball dominant, like what LeBron James usually plays in. And the Detroit Pistons were able to beat him, even though it was still a very tough series. But the Detroit Pistons were able to beat him. But finally, when they weren't able to beat him in 1991, they stated that we all of a sudden didn't just have to worry about Michael Jordan because he started facilitating, or overall he started, to trust his teammates more. Michael Jordan wasn't the point guard, so he didn't have the ball in his hands throughout the majority of the time in terms of like a Magic Johnson or like what a LeBron James is when they try to play the point. He's not a guy overall that does that. It became more of an equal opportunity offense. Now, does he probably still have the ball in his hands more than other players? Yeah, probably because, Michael Jordan was their main scorer. He was their main finisher. But at the end of the day, the reason why eventually the Chicago Bulls got over the Detroit Pistons is because Michael Jordan, he eventually learned how to trust his teammates. He knew that he had to. Because if he didn't overall do that and he played in a very ball-dominant way, they were never going to win a championship. You have to try to do that to win consistently. Otherwise you're not usually going to win a championship because it has to be more than just you that is majorly dangerous on the team.
a higher shooting percentage.
But in terms of the shooting percentage, LeBron James, I believe, has a higher shooting percentage by about 0.5%. But when you factor in the fact that Michael Jordan was 2 inches smaller than that of LeBron James, I believe 2 to 3 inches, shorter, a guy that probably was at the very least 20 to 30 pounds lighter than that overall of LeBron James. And on top of that, a lot of his shots, came throughout the mid-range as well, a lot more than what LeBron James does. LeBron also plays in a less defensive era. And on top of that, a lot of his shots come from about 2 to 5 feet away from the basket. And of course, a lot of Michael Jordan's shots did as well. But he also shot, I believe, a certain amount of more mid-range shots than what LeBron James did. If I'm wrong about that, someone correct me. But a lot of Michael Jordan's, shots, they didn't just come, from 2 or 3 feet away from the basket. LeBron James has a type of style to where, of course, it's very efficient, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. But, one could argue that for the era, especially, that his shooting percentage could even be a little bit higher, especially because he's able to bully his way to the basket, kind of like what a Karl Malone used to do. That's why a lot of people compare him correctly to Karl Malone.
Crazy.
What?
So when you consider that Michael Jordan was a shooting guard and, throughout the second half of his career, really wasn't anywhere near as much of a ball-dominant player, shot the ball probably a decent amount of more times, at least within a similar amount of a stretch, on top of that was asked to shoot the ball the most on the team, be their main finisher, and a guy that was smaller than LeBron James, both in height and weight, and in a more defensive era. The fact that their shooting percentage, their field goal percentage is separated by about 0.5%, is not really as big of an advantage in LeBron James's court as really what a lot of people try to say that it is.
Ever question that Michael Jordan is not the best? If you,
Jordan is
like,
ask you
I
a
know
question?
you watched him.
Can I ask you a question?
Like, no one controls. No one. I'm not talking about
what makes him?
No one
what makes him?
controls a basketball game like Michael Jordan controlled
You think
a
LeBron
basketball
doesn't
game.
control the
Fuck
basketball
no.
game?
Not like Mikey.
All-time great players control basketball game. But the question is how do you control the basketball game? See, Michael Jordan, once again, he played in actually a very ball-dominant type of way in the early part of his career. Because he was put on, the 80s Bulls, which was filled with a bunch of cokeheads and crackheads. So he kind of learned already not to really trust his teammates, and he was already kind of put in a ball dominant system. So he would put up great individual numbers, when it came down to it, even against the Boston Celtics and some of those other guys. Like, yeah, he still even gave them hell. But at the end of the day, Michael Jordan was not going to win the championship, overall until, of course, the team had developed a little bit more talent, which they just didn't have at that time. And then on top of that, Michael Jordan had to learn, to kind of once again trust his teammates, and it wasn't until then that they finally learned how to win a championship. And of course, LeBron James has won championships, playing in the ball dominant style. He also won 2 in Miami where they played a little bit more of an equal opportunity offense. And that's where you notice where LeBron James' statistics, where they came down a little bit. LeBron James didn't average, 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 assists or rebounds, because, what team basketball is about is knowing that each and every single player has an individual role and that they have value. LeBron James just takes a look at certain teammates and stating, okay, you know what, when it comes down to it, I'm going to be mainly everything. I'm going to get my rebounds, my assists, my points. I'm going to get my numbers, and then everyone else overall, like, you better make the shots when I pass it to you. And if you don't, overall, then you're going to get the blame. And that's not how real team basketball works. Real team basketball has plays that are set up for people. They have that of certain opportunities and times, that are set up for people. Certain people, are there to get more rebounds than the other guys, or overall to facilitate the basketball a little bit more, be the main finisher. When you're on a LeBron James team, you really don't know exactly overall what you're going to do unless he kicks it out for 3 for you, and, you end up shooting a 3, or once again, you make a shot when he passes it to you, whenever that may be. But you really don't know, and that's why in that type of system, usually they don't win consistently.
How'd he come back from the 3-1
Not
deficit?
like Mike used to.
That was 100% controlling the game.
Well, LeBron James partially came back in the 3-1 series. Let's also be real, because Draymond Green got himself suspended, and there was several things that kind of went wrong with the Warriors, if we're going to be real about that. But at the end of the day, LeBron does deserve credit for that. The Warriors still could have pulled it out in 7, and of course they didn't. So at the end of the day, LeBron James deserves credit for that. But there's also a big part of the reason why LeBron James is 4-6 in the NBA Finals.
Absolutely.
Man, have you
not
listened?
the way.
And certain people, of course, are going to state, oh, well, LeBron James didn't always have the better teams. And also, we're going to get into that as the video goes along.
Mike
Interviews,
used to.
the way players tell people that LeBron be knowing the plays,
Yeah.
that he be directing to show that he
I just
out-coaching the other team's coach.
I just
that
can't
is
give him
controlling the game. Yeah, I get it. Mike was the
I
most.
can't give him Mike.
But this is what I'm saying. Mike didn't have to play against the league that he created.
That is absolutely. When you said that, I was like, that's some real shit right there.
That's real shit.
Yeah, but
It's
it's not like he's
And what he's trying to state there, at least from what I believe, is that Michael Jordan, that apparently he created this very talented era, afterwards, blah, 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 and that Michael Jordan would have not been as great, as, what he was during the 90s, because of the competition, which is just nonsense. But once again, we're going to get into that a little bit later on. Once again, when you take a look at the teams that Michael Jordan faced off in the finals, they could be almost very comparable to that of the current day Denver Nuggets, where, that maybe they didn't have a superstar quite on the caliber of a Nikola Jokic, but, excuse me, they still had a superstar on their team in Clyde Drexler or Charles Barkley or Gary Payton or someone else like that, and they had several other players that could have been all-star level players. Like when you take a look at the Supersonics, for example, people say that Jordan's teams are so trash, that he played against. But keep in mind that Jordan in that series, he only had Scottie Pippen really as an all-star. Of course, Rodman was there, but, and Rodman, of course, is a great impact, especially for defense and rebounding, but he really can't do much else. And on top of that, it's not like he was the same Defensive Player of the Year award winner, defensive player like he was back in the late 80s, and early 90s with the Detroit Pistons. He wasn't quite the same, although he was still extremely impactful. But if you take a look at the Supersonics, for example, the Supersonics had Gary Payton, who was a Defensive Player of the Year award winner, and in his prime and in his peak, when they had fought off with them, he was, one of the best point guards in the league, the greatest defensive point guard of all time, by the way. They had Sean Kemp, who was extremely athletic and a guy that, overall I believe was a several-time All-Star. They had Detlef Schrempf, who was a decent shooter, 3-time All-Star. They had Hershey Hawkins on that team, who was averaging 11 points per game, and they had Sam Perkins. That team, talent-wise, they probably were somewhat comparable with what the current-day Denver Nuggets overall would have been. But a lot of people, because LeBron James got the face off against the Nuggets, they'll claim the Nuggets are this super team, overall, and that the Supersonics weren't, because they're trying to tear down Michael Jordan. And one of the only ways that they can try to tear down Michael Jordan and actually get LeBron James in the conversation is allege that his competition was quote unquote weak, which it wasn't.
Not going to destroy this league today. Michael Jordan could play today at his prime and be the best player.
Today would be giving Michael buckets.
Are you
hear me?
kidding me?
Devin Booker would be dropping that nigga off. He would kill Devin Booker, but Devin Booker would be dropping that nigga off.
No.
If you think...
Well, there are certain shooting guards, of course, today and players that, of course, would give Michael Jordan buckets, just as they would give LeBron James buckets in certain games. But keep in mind that Michael Jordan has a Defensive Player of the Year award. LeBron James does not. And Michael Jordan, I believe, for being 2 inches shorter and a decent amount lower in weight compared to that of LeBron James, and playing a shooting guard, I believe that overall he's had multiple seasons, maybe even a few seasons where he had over 200 steals and over 100 blocks. LeBron James has actually never even had one season, I believe, doing that.
For a second that he...
So keep in mind that Michael Jordan, when you talk about him debatably being the greatest player ever, is, especially for his position, when you talk about for his position, Michael Jordan is the most all-around skilled and most impactful and most valuable and accomplished shooting guard of all time. And anyone else in that position, it's really not even close. Even like all-time greats like Kobe Bryant and some other guys, there's just no comparison. Michael Jordan, once again, he was the greatest offensive shooting guard of all time and debatably the most, impactful offensive player of all time and the greatest offensive player of all time. And defensively, he was the greatest defensive shooting guard of all time. LeBron is not the greatest defensive nor offensive overall, small forward of all time. And I know a lot of people are going to state, what? How could you state that? When you compare LeBron James in terms of offense, he's definitely up there. But if you want to compare him to Larry Bird, no, he's not quite as great as what Larry Bird was offensively. Larry Bird was a greater shooter, from basically every single range. He was probably, debatably up there with LeBron James as a passer. But, he had Dennis Johnson, a real point guard on his team, and he actually played system basketball. So he didn't say, give me the ball 24/7, so I can get my numbers. He sacrificed a little bit. That way the team overall would have the best chance of winning. That's what the great players do that usually become a dynasty. And you notice that LeBron James, that none of his teams have ever became dynasties. All right, none of them. Now, some people may say the Miami Heat, but they only won 2 in a row. And to be quite honest with you, they were really lucky to get that. That's why LeBron James, he's created a dynasty for himself, of course. But when you talk about an individual team, he's never created a dynasty for an individual franchise because he can't really develop players into being greater players. And, this has also been another myth about LeBron James where people say, oh, he's just so unselfish and he makes players greater. When have you ever really seen LeBron James make a teammate greater? Like, when have they actually ever had their best statistical season with LeBron James? Kyrie Irving made the 50-40-90 club just a couple of years ago. Did he do it with LeBron James? Did Kevin Love and, Chris Bosh, did they really have their best statistical seasons, with LeBron James? Did any of these other players really have their best seasons with LeBron James? Whereas if you look at other players, like a Steph Curry, Kevin Durant had his best years, not just success-wise, but statistically with Stephen Curry. Andrew Wiggins had his best years with Stephen Curry. Like, you remember when Steph Curry, won the championship in 2022? Like, that was a team that never really should have even been there. Like, Steph Curry was able to take an older Klay Thompson, pretty much a done Draymond Green, and Andrew Wiggins to the NBA Finals and actually beat the number 1 defense in the league. That's what Steph Curry was able to do.
Of the elite scorers.
Michael Jordan?
And that's not me stating that Steph Curry, in my view, is greater than LeBron James, but in terms of LeBron James's impact, especially on his team, it's been massively overrated.
Kobe was
The best defensive player of... Michael Jordan is one of the best defensive players of all, not just score.
Yes, he definitely is, and for his position, he's a greater defensive player than what LeBron James is, period. End of discussion. There's no conversation about it.
Yes, when
Michael
you're guarding
Jordan is one
Craig
of
Elo.
the
But that is Danny Ainge, he's giving that nigga fits.
Out of here.
But I promise you, my guy, James Harden is giving that nigga buckets. Ain't nothing he can...
And of course, this is the regular LeBron James, argument of, oh, Michael Jordan never guarded, the best player on the other team, which is bullshit. Michael Jordan, of course, was still able to give fits overall to certain players like Magic Johnson and, Clyde Drexler and other guys like that. Now, of course, is that me stating that he would just absolutely shut them down all the time? No, of course not. And at the end of the day, those guys are high-level players, so they're going to get buckets over you. But this myth, by the way, that LeBron James could, clearly guard the 1 through 5 overall, all this other bullshit. LeBron James could never really consistently guard the 4 and 5s to the point to where he was really shutting them down. All that is a myth. If you take a look at the LeBron James series against Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Dirk Nowitzki, overall Dwight Howard, he wasn't shutting those guys down. Just stop.
Dude, James gonna lower that shoulder on that
And by the time overall that Kobe Bryant and some of those other players are probably, getting buckets on Michael Jordan. I mean, Kobe Bryant, it may have been when Michael Jordan still was a championship level player. I can't remember. Because I think that Kobe was drafted. I thought he was drafted in either 97 or 98. But I can't remember. But Paul Pierce, I thought he was drafted maybe a bit later. But, keep in mind that a lot of those probably also were during the Washington Wizard years where Michael Jordan was done. He was done as a player. He was no longer anywhere near the same player as what he was, when it came down to it. And it's just interesting because the LeBron James fans always love to bring up the Washington Wizard years. But if you were to bring up how LeBron James recently just lost the Denver Nuggets series in the past 2 years, they'd be like, oh, well, LeBron James is in his 20th season and, 39 years old. What do you expect him to do? There's always some sort of excuse for LeBron James.
ass Euro step. Jordan ain't nothing but 215, nigga. They not.
Michael Jordan is not guarding 1 through 5 like LeBron.
Man, listen.
But LeBron really doesn't guard the 1 through 5 as efficiently as what a lot of people try to state that he does. He's not a guy overall that if you put him on prime Dwight Howard that he's going to shut down Dwight Howard or severely limit him. It's not going to happen. And that's why overall Dwight Howard was able to beat them, I believe, within 5 or 6 games in 2009. All right? So it is what it is. All right? He's not shutting down Tim Duncan. He's not shutting down Dirk Nowitzki. He's not shutting down Kevin Garnett. He's not shutting down any of those players. Pau Gasol. He's not shutting down any of those players. Now, has there been times where, LeBron has shut down certain players? Like a Derrick Rose, yeah, but once again, when have you ever seen LeBron James, especially in a playoff series, to where you're like, wow, he really made Tim Duncan look bad yesterday, or he really made Kevin Garnett look really bad yesterday, he really made Dirk Nowitzki look really bad yesterday? It's not going to happen.
LeBron's special, but I just can't give
Michael Jordan did not. When Michael Jordan, let me tell you something. Paul Pierce was putting up numbers against that nigga. Kobe was putting up numbers against that nigga. Listen, he did not play against the league he created. If Michael Jordan came in the league at 1997, I believe he would have been the best player in the league during that duration. He would have been better than Vince. He would have been better than Tracy. He would have been better than Kobe. He would have been better than all these niggas. But it wouldn't have been by a lot like people think it would have been.
Right.
These niggas, Vince Carter would have been putting a hand in his face.
Now, what about his demeanor?
That's what separates him from everybody else. Michael Jordan will.
No, what separates Michael Jordan from everybody else is that Michael Jordan, overall, once again, is debatably the most complete basketball player. Overall, at least when you talk about both offense and defense, and on top of that, his accomplishments. You're talking about a player like LeBron James fans overall will always legitimately try to debate you that, all Michael Jordan fans have, overall is the championships. That's literally it. Michael Jordan has LeBron James beaten literally so many statistics and it's within a way less amount of time. The argument is really not a debate. Once again, you're talking about a guy that played for about 13 and a half seasons compared to LeBron James's 19 or 19 and a half seasons when you include injuries. And you're talking about a guy that won more MVPs, more finals MVPs, more defensive accolades. It's really not even a conversation.
Bury you.
Yeah.
What are we exactly?
Yeah.
But so who do you want on the team? That guy.
He going to his
What are you talking about? Of course I want that guy on.
Right, but you have to bring up more arguments that's just in, killer instinct and winning. You have to bring up overall more points than that. Now, of course, Michael Jordan is a guy that, of course, like I said, he was a multiple MVP winner. So Michael Jordan has to be compared differently than what a Steve Kerr or someone overall like a Dennis Rodman or someone like a Robert Horry would be. I have certain people that always try to bring up the point about, if we're just talking championships, how come Robert Horry isn't as great as Michael Jordan? That means he's as great as Michael Jordan, right? Right, but why would you even bring up that point in the first place? Because that point doesn't make any sense. That's like me overall going, because Robert Horry averaged 9 points per game for his whole entire career. He was a great little role player. They called him Big Shot Bob for a reason. He'd make a lot of big shots down in the clutch, but You know, it wasn't like he was this major MVP caliber player. Like, I don't even think he made a single All-Star team, maybe one. So it's like, you know, people always trying to make those comparisons, but it just doesn't make any sense. Like, to me, it'd be like comparing Julian Edelman and Jerry Rice because, you know, they won a similar amount of championships. Even though Julian Edelman, I believe, has never made, you know, a Pro Bowl appearance, and Jerry Rice was literally one of the only MVPs ever, if not the only MVP ever, to win it as a wide receiver. So it's like, why the hell would you compare that? That just doesn't even make any sense.
My team.
Yeah.
I think he got
Over anyone.
I think he got a file. We
Go
might
get
be
any stats
we might
you
be
want.
in trouble.
Because LeBron just ain't good enough, man. I
It's
get
not
it.
that-
He's
I'm-
setting us up.
No,
Here we
it's
go.
like, no, it's like what you
Let
said.
it go,
I'm
let
not
it
saying
go.
he's
just
not
not-
one of the
he's just
greatest.
not good enough.
He's not better than Michael Jordan.
I get you.
Ain't no fucking way.
Not only is he not better or greater than Michael Jordan, he's also not greater than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's not greater than Bill Russell. He's also not greater than Magic Johnson. Period. You know, and this also goes to show you a lot of these LeBron James fans, they really don't know what the fuck they're talking about, because I always love to make this argument about how Michael Jordan didn't face shit, you know, overall, and that he couldn't pass like LeBron and he couldn't do this like LeBron. Take a look at his stats and all sort of stuff. Right, well, if you're going to make that debate overall because of not only the position that they play, but because of the type of system that they play in, why would you not debate Magic Johnson and LeBron James? Because Magic Johnson or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it's always only between LeBron James and Michael Jordan. Like, if you ask LeBron James fans, they'll be like, oh, yeah, well, I still think Michael Jordan is the second greatest player of all time. Well, why would you think that if you truly knew what you were talking about, you know, and actually were convicted on your beliefs? Why would you believe that? Because wouldn't Magic Johnson be over Michael Jordan too, since he averages more rebounds per game and more assists, and he fought against teams that you could say were more super teams during the 80s era? You know, but, you know, because that's what the 80s era was about, including Magic Johnson. He had his own super team. You know, but these guys, you can tell they don't know what the fuck they're ever talking about.
Hey, you remember the Warriors have owned LeBron James. Ain't nothing he can do to beat these niggas. Only beat them once.
Right.
This is LeBron James' stats against the Warriors.
And here comes overall the LeBron James leading in every single statistic argument. But once again, I'm going to bring up a point overall at the end of this, so let's listen.
27 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists. 28 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists. 29 points, 9 rebounds, 13 assists. 29 points, 11 rebounds, 14 assists. 31 points, 10 rebounds, 11 assists. 32 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists. 32 points, 18 rebounds, 9 assists. 33 points, 10 rebounds.
Do you want me to pull up Wilt Chamberlain's stats that you're not mentioning?
You're talking about a center in the 1960s. He did this in 2016, 17, 18.
People always try to act like Wilt Chamberlain was in an era of bums. No, he wasn't in an era of bums. Wilt Chamberlain was playing against Bill Russell, John Havlicek, Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. All right, you know, some other guys, you know, that I might be forgetting to mention, you know, possibly even Rick Barry. I can't remember. You know, he may have been more 70s. I know that, of course, he was in the ABA, so maybe not Rick Barry. I'd have to remember. But, you know, he played against a great amount of players. You know, and I'm sure that there's a couple of other colors that, you know, I'm forgetting at the moment. But no, that was not just some era that was filled with bums. Elgin Baylor, you know, that's another one. You know, Wilt Chamberlain had to play against those guys.
You talking
But we're
about
not
Kareem
done.
Abdul-Jabbar
We're not
being the best
done.
player ever when he had the
33,
most points for 30
33,
years?
10 and 11, 39, 11 and 9, 39, 16 and 11, 40, 12 and 8, 40, 14 and 11, 41, 8 and 11, 41, 13 and 8, 41, 16 and 7, 44, 8 and 6, 51, 8 and 8.
So
Ryan,
West,
who-
West,
wait, wait,
West-
wait, wait.
Worst game against the Warriors is 27, 11, and 11. And y'all go, he's a loser in the finals. Nigga, give him Pippen. Give him Pippen and fucking Rodman and good fucking Kukoc.
Well, first of all, because he brought up 2 points here that I want to talk about. But the first point that I'm going to talk about, of course, is that LeBron James fans, they always use his stats. They always love to hide overall behind that. Oh, well, LeBron led in every single statistic. You know, how can you say overall that LeBron James, you know, that it's really his fault that, you know, they lost the series? But what people don't really understand is that in basketball, that you're not supposed to be leading in every single offensive statistic or in every single statistic. Now, every once in a while, it can happen if you, you know, have it throughout the natural flow of a game like a Magic Johnson, who's an all-time great point guard. And, of course, he's a great passer and a great rebounder because he's 6'9". You know, every once in a while you'll have a Nikola Jokic to where, you know, he pretty much is, you know, at the current moment in time right now in the league, you know, debatably the best rebounder, passer, and scorer for his position. You know, but he does it in a natural flow of a game. They also do it while playing off the ball. LeBron James is a ball dominator. In order for him to be effective, he has to be on the ball. And what you notice about overall dynasties is that whenever it comes to their greatest player, they never lead in every single statistic. Never. All right. When it came to the Larry Bird Boston Celtics, you know, during the 80s, all right, Larry Bird was their greatest player. There was never a series where he just led in every single statistic, where he led in passing and rebounding and points and this and that because they had to play team basketball. All right, when Tim Duncan was a champion with the Spurs, you know, you're never going to see a series where Tim Duncan just led in every single statistic other than probably points and rebounds, you know, and blocks and stuff like that, you know, because that's what Tim Duncan's position was. All right, if Tim Duncan overall probably wanted to play, you know, overall the point forward, then yeah, he probably could have done that. But, you know, Tim Duncan realized overall that they had a point guard for that. They had Tony Parker. All right, when it came down to it, you know, when it comes to that of Magic Johnson, even him, and he was a facilitator. He was a real point guard. You're not going to find him leading overall in every single statistic either. You know, because once again, what real team basketball is about, it's a little bit about sacrifice, and it's realizing and it's divesting power into your other teammates and your other players, not just making the whole entire team about you. And not overall, once again, just, you know, giving, you know, the other teammates less opportunities and only giving the ball overall to the more talented teammates at times, or only to the teammates that you finally find wide open. But there's no real plays run. They don't really have a significant role. All right, that's a big problem with LeBron James. That's a big part of the problem overall of why he's 4-6 in the NBA Finals. You know, because LeBron James, when it comes down to it, once again, he plays in a very ball-dominant way. And we see it very similar with Luka Doncic. Like Luka Doncic fans, who are a lot of the times LeBron James fans, because they're basically playing in the same type of system. You know, like what do we eventually hear about Luka Doncic? What did Kristaps Porzingis say about Luka Doncic? He said that Luka Doncic is not giving us enough opportunities. And there was eventually a little bit of hostility between them because Kristaps Porzingis said that he's not giving me enough opportunities. He's not giving the rest of the team enough opportunities. He was calling out Luka Doncic on his bullshit. And it's the same thing with LeBron James. And that's why other players have also stated that he's not giving his teammates enough opportunities. Because when you do that, when you play in that ball dominant system, they don't have to mainly worry about as the other players as much as what they have to worry about you. Because you have the ball so much in your hands, you're going to have the most amount of opportunities, and it's going to make you look even more proficient than what you actually are because you get more opportunities. But the less opportunities that you give your teammates to possibly facilitate the ball or take shots or do that, that means you're going to make them more cold down the game. That means they're going to be more nervous because they don't exactly know when they're going to get the ball. You know, and on top of that, once again, it's going to make them less of a threat, so they don't have to worry about them as much. You know, that's why, you know, when Michael Jordan finally, when he faced off against the Pistons in 91, you know, there were key players that eventually were a threat that they didn't just have to worry about Michael Jordan anymore. There was Scottie Pippen. There was John Paxson, I believe. There was other players, Horace Grant, you know, I believe. They actually had to worry about some of the other teammates because Michael Jordan learned that if I'm going to win this series, you know, if we're going to win this series, I have overall to make the team, you know, as a whole, as a threat. And in order to do that, my statistics are going to have to go down a little bit in order to improve the players around me. Because the more opportunities you take away from them, then that means overall that the more opportunities are going to you. Which means what? Which means overall that they know that the ball is going to be in your hands the majority of the time. And then that means overall that once again, they know your main style of offense, that the ball is mainly going to be revolved around you. And that they don't have to worry about the other teammates as much. And that's a big problem with LeBron James. But let's also rewind this because this man, of course, is also bringing up the Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman argument.
His worst game against the Warriors is 27, 11, and 11. And y'all go, he's a loser in the finals. Nigga, give him Pippen. Give him Pippen and fucking Rodman and good fucking Kukoc. He wouldn't have lost either.
This is the thing that the LeBron James fans always try to do whenever it comes to that of Michael Jordan. They try to state that the era was quote-unquote trash, but that Michael Jordan apparently that he just had every single all-star in the league on his team. Like that's what they try to allege. And no, that's not the case whatsoever. Michael Jordan really only had one main all-star to work with throughout his whole entire career. That was Scottie Pippen. Now, of course, he had Dennis Rodman, you know, to a certain degree. But Dennis Rodman never made an all-star team with Michael Jordan. Now, you can debate that he was a borderline all-star if you want to debate that, but that's why I always state, just because someone does not make the all-star team doesn't always make them immediately a bum. You know, if you have a great role player on a team or a great player to where you know how to utilize that player, they can be very dangerous, you know. But anyway.
You can't talk shit about the era and say Mike.
And keep in mind that Dwayne Wade, by the way, the greatest player that Michael Jordan ever got to play with was Scottie Pippen. And the greatest player that LeBron James ever got to play with was Dwayne Wade, at least in terms of their prime. And keep in mind that, yes, Dwayne Wade is greater than what Scottie Pippen ever was. Scottie Pippen was a great sidekick. Dwayne Wade at one point in time actually was able to lead his team to a championship. Before LeBron James even got there, Dwayne Wade was already an NBA champion on that same franchise and won a Finals MVP. All right, so keep that in mind. So let's not bring up the Scottie Pippen point when we know damn well that LeBron James overall has had to deal probably with greater and more talented players than what a Scottie Pippen was.
Didn't play against anyone and then say he had good players on his team.
He did. He didn't play
either that
against
era
them.
was trash.
No, he played against Dennis Rodman, and Dennis.
Agreed, sir. Agreed. You know, the LeBron James fans always try to do this bullshit. That's one of the few points overall that one of the two of these guys actually brought up. That was a decent point. The LeBron James fans always try to sit here and debate that the 90s was trash, but then apparently every player on Michael Jordan's team that would get 5 or, 9 points per game, apparently they were like these, Hall of Fame level players. Like, get the hell out of here.
Rodman got 2 rings on Jordan's watch. Nigga beat that nigga in Detroit. Won 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Listen, Michael Jordan.
Who you drafting? Who's your first pick? Is it LeBron or is it Michael Jordan?
Can I ask you a question?
Well, why the hell would he pick Michael Jordan when you idiots haven't overall given him any overall, once again, good counterpoints? These guys, there's no offense, but these guys overall really don't know shit about this argument. These guys, all they really have for a defense is that who you drafted, who you this, who you that. Dude, that's not really an argument. You actually have to come up with an intelligent counterpoint. And there's no offense against these guys, but at least for this conversation, they're not really qualified to talk about this. And I'm not stating that I'm this basketball expert necessarily, but I at least know enough to counter some of these arguments. Like these dudes are idiots. It just is what it is. But anyways, when it comes down to the overall, I'm going to rewind it because this guy brought up a point that I thought was interesting.
Defensive Player of the Year awards. Listen, Michael Jordan.
Who you draft?
Rodman, and Dennis Rodman got 2 rings.
That was the point that I wanted to talk about because, of course, a lot of Michael, a lot of LeBron James fans, they'll talk about, well, if Michael Jordan was that great, how come he couldn't get past the Detroit Pistons? Well, Michael Jordan, keep in mind that at that time, that Michael Jordan did not really have the most amount of talent on his team. And he still was giving them, a great series. Keep in mind, sometimes, 6, later on 7 games, and the Detroit Pistons clearly were the more talented team, when it came down to. Now, of course, that's not always an excuse, but basically, Michael Jordan and the Bulls were not ready yet to win a championship. Michael Jordan, when he was facing off against the Detroit Pistons, what that basically would have been like LeBron James in 2018 facing off against the 2017 Golden State Warriors or the 2008 Boston Celtics immediately in the first round, or in the Eastern Conference Finals eventually, because the Boston Celtics and the Detroit Pistons that Michael Jordan had to face off against, those were legitimate all-time great super teams. You're talking about a Boston Celtics team that had Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, Dennis Johnson, Bill Walton on the bench, So, literally, they were comparable in terms of talent. They were literally comparable with any team within the league's history. And the Detroit Pistons, they had Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Bill Laimbeer, who else was on there? Dennis Rodman, Adrian Dantley, I believe, for a short time was on there, Vinnie Johnson. Those teams were absolutely loaded. There were 4 super teams at least throughout the 80s era. There was the Philadelphia 76ers, with, Maurice Cheeks, I believe, Bobby Jones, what was his name? Moses Malone, Julius Erving or Dr. J, a couple of other guys, they had that team. Then they had, the Showtime Lakers with Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, Brian Scott, Michael Thompson, who was Klay Thompson's father. They had, who else on that team, I believe? I think that I'm missing, one player. But Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, of course, if I didn't mention him. And then there might be a couple of other players that I'm not mentioning. I think I mentioned James Worthy, and then, of course, you had the Detroit Pistons, who once again had Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Bill Laimbeer, Adrian Dantley for a short time, Vinnie Johnson, Dennis Rodman. Those teams were absolutely loaded.
On Jordan's watch, nigga beat that nigga in Detroit. Won 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Listen, Michael
Who
Jordan.
you draft? Who you draft?
So like I said, the only way that you can really compare that, would have been like LeBron James in 2018. When he had that team, had he been facing off against the 2017 Golden State Warriors, which of course he did in 2018, and we all saw what happened. He got swept.
Who's your first pick? Is it LeBron or is it Michael Jordan?
Can I ask you a question?
Or Kobe?
Has LeBron or Kobe made it? Not has Jordan or Kobe ever made it to a finals without the best team in their respective conferences?
Well, if you're talking about just the Eastern or the Western Conference for that of Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, overall I can't really comment as much for Kobe Bryant, but to be fair, Kobe Bryant was able to get past the San Antonio Spurs, I believe, once or twice, if we are going to go there, even when I believe Shaquille O'Neal was no longer on the team. So there's a couple of times at least where you could debate that Kobe Bryant, maybe was able to get out of a conference where maybe it looked like there was a team that could compete with them in terms of talent, or possibly, I don't want to state more talented necessarily, but certainly would have been a serious threat. But I mean, to me, this question right here is only really worth so much, because if we're really going to go there, for LeBron James, how many of those teams in his respective conference were actually really better or more talented than his teams in the Eastern Conference? Like, it's no offense against LeBron James, but other than the early on 2000s Detroit Pistons and, somewhat of, the early 2010s or, the latter part 2000s, latter part of the 2000s Boston Celtics with Garnett and those guys, like, who else really was a real threat? Because it wasn't the DeMar DeRozan Raptors. It wasn't the Paul George-led Pacers. It wasn't overall, the just beginning out Jason Tatum-led Celtics. Like, none of those teams were a legitimate threat.
No, they were the best team.
Yeah. LeBron get there with a bunch of school.
Kobe was not the...
No, LeBron James overall does not get there with a bunch of schoolgirls. And keep in mind that LeBron James, when you talk about any other top 10 player, LeBron probably, which is ironic because he gets the most amount of excuses out of any other player of all time, LeBron has probably had the most amount of talent at his disposal out of any other all-time great player, out of any other all-time top 10 player. He's probably had the most amount of talent at his disposal. Like, this man has had a legitimate 3 to maybe even 5 to 6 top 10 players in the league work with him.
Best. The Lakers were not the best.
Like, he's had Dwayne Wade, he's had Chris Bosh, he's had Kyrie Irving, he's had Kevin Love, he's had AD, and that's not even counting, all the other role players, or all the other players like J.R. Smith, Jay Crowder, Derrick Rose for a short amount of time, all these other guys. Because whenever it comes to other teams, like, they'll try to make it sound like all these other players, whenever they played against LeBron, like even the guy that was averaging 5 points per game, like, oh, he was this major impact and all that stuff, right? But then any player that's on LeBron James's team, even if they were talented on a team before, when it came down to it, they were no longer on LeBron James's team, overall, then all of a sudden, they're not that good. And once again, isn't it interesting that role players or players can come on LeBron James's team and they don't seem to be as impactful as what they were before? No one ever questions that, though. Like, people always state, this thing about, oh, well, LeBron James, he was so good on this other team, or, these players that are playing with LeBron James, he was so good on this other team. How come he wasn't good with LeBron James and the Lakers or this other team? What does that say about LeBron James's impact? Like I've already stated, LeBron James's impact is probably the most overrated in NBA history. Because at least for a top 10 player, because he doesn't really make players greater. He doesn't really make players individually better. He doesn't develop players into better players. That's not what he does. All right, he's not Larry Bird. He's not Magic Johnson. He's not Michael Jordan or Tim Duncan in that category. He can't do that. All right, he doesn't make players individually better. How LeBron James wins championships is that your team already has talent there, and he has to bring talent in. And if you can't do one of those two things, he's not winning the championship. All right, he's not winning the championship, period. And that was proven once he first went out with the LA Lakers, overall for certain, because overall, once again, people always bring up how Michael Jordan was only good, overall for 2 more games and all sort of stuff. No, which we'll talk about here in a bit because he's going to bring it up as well. No one ever talks how LeBron James was only good for 1 more win than what the LA Lakers got, I believe, back in 2019. Remember when LeBron James, the Lakers with Kyle Kuzma, Lonzo Ball, and Brandon Ingram, they had all this talent. And apparently they're like, oh, well, the Lakers, LeBron finally has young talent to work with him, overall. So, people are going to be in trouble. LeBron can't develop new players or young blood. He can't develop players into being greater players. That's not what he's ever done. And that's why whenever it came to the LA Lakers situation, he couldn't take them to the playoffs. Because LeBron doesn't develop new talent in the All-Stars. He doesn't develop players in the All-Stars. He either has to have All-Stars already on the team or he has to bring them in there. All right, that's what LeBron James does. He doesn't develop players into greater players. Never has.
He made it a couple times.
Yeah. And that's why so many other players, when you take a look at their stats with LeBron James, they don't really improve that much proficiency-wise, nor overall in other stats when it comes down to it, because he's such a ball dominator, when it comes down to it. And on top of that, that's why so many people always complain, well, how come this guy was so good over here, but he's not as good with LeBron James? You know why? The reason why that is? Because LeBron James' impact and value, it's nowhere near as impactful as what a lot of people say. Now, in terms of individual impact, LeBron James is pretty much up there with anybody in basketball history. But this is a team game. In terms of team impact, I could probably name you a bunch of different players that in terms of the team impact, yeah, they probably have more impact than what a LeBron James ever has. Because LeBron James, once again, he's not great off the ball. He's not a guy, once again, that is going to improve your players individually. When you talk about players like, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Tim Duncan, Steph Curry, other players like that, even Shaquille O'Neal, all those guys, around them, like they to a certain degree improve players around them better than what LeBron James ever has. LeBron James, once again, he doesn't improve the players around him. He improves the team because of his individual talent, but at the end of the day, no, he doesn't make players around him better.
Listen, he literally just said
he drugged to the
Pau
championship.
Gasol. You know the fuck Pau Gasol was? He was a perennial all-star. That was a blockbuster trade when he went over there.
Pau Gasol
They were winning.
was the
Come on. The Grizzlies was winning 50 games, and he was the best player on.
Well, Pau Gasol and the LA Lakers, I mean, they definitely had a very talented team those 2 or 3 years when Kobe Bryant made the finals for 3 straight years. The Kobe Bryant fans, of course, have made it very, certain to make sure that Kobe Bryant was like on himself in that game or in that series. No, he wasn't. He had a lot of talent, overall. But if we also are all going to go there, to be fair, Kobe Bryant did win against the Boston Celtics team where they clearly probably out-talented that of the LA Lakers, and Kobe Bryant, at least by a little bit. And, Kobe Bryant, without any top 75 players of all time, if we're going to go there, he was able to beat them. LeBron James, he has to probably have a top 75 player of all time, or at the very least a top 10 player, if not even a little bit higher, overall, to potentially win a series in the first place. Like, you're never going to see LeBron James be slightly out-talented in a series against, a great basketball team in terms of IQ and also in terms of talent, and, he just literally dominates them or beats them. It's never going to happen. That's why every time LeBron James faces against elite level basketball teams and he doesn't have the talent advantage and they have great IQ, he usually gets his teeth kicked in. Whether it be 2014 against the Spurs, 2017 against the Warriors, or 2011 against the Mavericks when he blew that series. So it is what it is. And people will say, oh, how can you state that LeBron James, overall, how can you blame him for the 2017 loss? Well, listen, dude, at the end of the day, you're supposed to be allegedly the GOAT, which means that this is a team game. So this is basketball. So that means that debatably that you have to be, if you're not the most accomplished, which he certainly isn't, then that means overall that you have to be the most impactful and valuable, right? That's what that means. And we all know that that's not the case, because if LeBron James overall, once again, that he's pretty much good only for winning you 1 game in the series when he has 2 other All-Stars on his team, and the Golden State Warriors have about 4 to 3.5 All-Stars on their team, with Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry, and, LeBron has himself, Kevin Love, Kyrie Irving, and a multitude of other very great role players, very talented role players like J.R. Smith, who I believe made 1 All-Star team and did some other stuff, Kyle Korver, how come overall that series was not more competitive? How come they got completely blown out? In 2014, once again, LeBron, allegedly the most impactful player ever. That's what his fanboys will tell you. How come once again, against the Spurs team where they were a little bit older, Tim Duncan was 37 years old. They had 1 All-Star on that team that year. I think it was Manu Ginobili in 2014 or Tony Parker, one of the two. Tony Parker, overall, I believe was a little bit older. Tim Duncan was 37 years old. Keep in mind, he was still a very great player, but still not quite the same. as what he once was. Kawhi Leonard was a baby. He had not even made a single All-Star appearance yet. And LeBron James had 3 total All-Stars on his team, including himself, with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. How come LeBron James couldn't at least make that series closer? You get your ass kicked within 5 games. Like Larry Bird, when he faced off against the Showtime Lakers, he was always a little bit out-talented against the Lakers, just ever so slightly. But he was always at least able to take that series to 6 and win one game, one series against those guys. Like LeBron has never won a series overall really to where he did not either have the talent advantage, overall, or where it was very comparable. This myth about how LeBron won the 2016 finals and, the Warriors were like the greatest team of all time. No, they weren't. They had an excellent regular season, but they were starting to show cracks in the postseason. They had Steph Curry, who was a great player. They had Klay Thompson, who was a decently great player, and Draymond Green, who pretty much was like the current day Dennis Rodman, but not quite as good on defense or rebounding. So it is what it is. So that was not some super team, is what a lot of people really try to allege. So all that is a bunch of baloney.
That team. Bro, this is crazy. That's why I hate revisionist history. You're going to act like Pau Gasol. You know why Pau Gasol wasn't the best power forward in the league? Because KG and fucking Tim Duncan existed and Dirk Nowitzki existed. But not being as good as them don't make you a bum. He was just...
Well, I agree, but you also should keep the same energy with a lot of the 90s players. Just because they're not on the same level as what a Michael Jordan was, or some of the other guys, or maybe some of the other players, doesn't mean that they're bums. Once again, we could take a look at that Nikola Jokic Denver Nuggets team right now, and we can make all sort of excuses if they end up losing in the playoffs this year and say, oh, well, Nikola Jokic, to be fair, he doesn't have a single All-Star teammate because Jamal Murray has never made an All-Star team. Michael Porter Jr. has never made an All-Star team. Aaron Gordon has never made an All-Star team. All right, so, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has never made an All-Star team, but that team is a very great team. Now, I wouldn't claim them to be a super team necessarily, but that's what a lot of the 90s teams were like.
Below them, and Kobe got to play with a nigga who's just below.
And once again, take a look at the LA Lakers that the Chicago Bulls had to face up against. Take a look at them. When they had to face up against them in 1991, the Lakers had Vlade Divac, they had Magic Johnson, they had James Worthy, they had Byron Scott, I believe, they had Sam Perkins. That was not just some bum ass team. Now, were they the same Showtime Lakers? No, of course not. But they were still overall a team that could compete, no doubt about it. So they were still a team overall that was very competitive. People try to act like they were just a bunch of bums. No, they weren't. And he's going to bring up Vlade Divac here in a bit. Against the Portland Trail Blazers, they had Jerome Kersey, Kevin Duckworth, I believe 2 borderline All-Star level players. They had Clyde Drexler, and some other guys. 1993, they had Charles Barkley, MVP that year, All-Star. They had Dan Marley, who was a 3-time All-Star, averaging 15 points per game that year, I believe. They had Kevin Johnson, who was a great PG, and a 3-time All-Star before he got injured. And of course, they had Richard Dumas averaging 15 points per game that year. Didn't even make the All-Star team that year. And then in 1996, once again, I already told you guys about the Supersonics. And then in 1997, I can go over the Supersonics again. Like I said, they had Gary Payton, Sam Perkins, Deadlift Shrimp, who was a 3-time All-Star, averaging 17 points per game that year. They also had that of Hershey Hawkins, and that of Sam Perkins, And then, of course, in 1997, they had the Utah Jazz, which were an excellently coached team. The same team that Phil Jackson stated that he wanted his Kobe and Shaq Lakers to avoid because he knew that they had the IQ to potentially beat them. The Utah Jazz. They had Karl Malone, John Stockton, Jeff Hornacek, and some other guys. So when you actually take a look at it, you could debate that actually the majority of the time that Michael Jordan was actually slightly out-talented in terms of overall the teams that he faced in the NBA Finals. But, you have to do research for that.
Oh, Dirk Nowitzki and them. Mm-hmm. Come on, man. Don't.
So you drafted
Name
LeBron.
the rest of the players on that team.
Yeah, he had other bums like Ron Artest, Trevor Ariza.
Andrew Bynum at his prime.
Yeah, Andrew Bynum in his prime. Scrubs. Derek Fisher, the guy he's never won a ring without. You know what I mean? Certain guys are, Phil Jackson.
Right, but we can state the same thing overall by LeBron James. How many All-Star level players has LeBron James had to play with?
Head coach. You know how many people LeBron has taken to the finals?
So, hey, Josh, what was the team that you said are better than the Lakers in 2008, 2009, 2010? The Nuggets? Like, what team are you referring to were better than the Lakers in 2008?
In the league, I'm sure they weren't favorited to win with that fucking
I'm talking
roster.
about in the West.
Man, that's
in the West.
crazy.
In the West.
The Lakers was like the 1 and 2 seed. What do you mean they wasn't favored? They was whenever they were the 7th seed. And he had a chance to draft him as the
He's not
seed.
even in the top for.
Yo,
Michael Jordan.
I'm not a Kobe person
Michael
either.
Jordan is better than LeBron James. Ever,
Michael Jordan.
all time.
So what?
Well, to talk about Kobe Bryant's, his all-time ranking, Kobe Bryant to me, if you were to put him slightly in the top 10, I'd understand. If you would put him in the top 15, I would also kind of understand. To me, Kobe Bryant, Steph Curry, and Hakeem Olajuwon, they're kind of fighting, for that number 10 or number 9 spot. They're anywhere from like 9 to 12 for me, or at least, 10 to like 11, 10 to 12, somewhere around there. And then Shaq might be included there as well.
Did he make it to where he didn't have the best team?
That's your only argument because he was the best.
Well, once again, like I just recently stated, Michael Jordan, you can actually debate in almost every single final series that you can actually debate that talent for talent, that those teams were slightly more talented, if not decently more talented than the Chicago Bulls, at least if you want to just take a look at it on paper. But Michael Jordan, of course, in the Chicago Bulls, they knew how to empower their teammates and have them play essential roles. Because, people always try to, tell you this shit about how John Paxson was like this Hall of Famer. They're like, no, he wasn't. Like, people tried to sit here and act like John Paxson, Steve Kerr, B.J. Armstrong, overall, like, all these other guys, Luke Longley, like, these guys were just all-time great players, and they weren't.
That's y'all's argument.
Because
about
when Michael
his
Jordan is
winning.
on a team,
But he has to
that
be the
team
best.
is favored, of course, because
Yes,
he's on the
but
fucking
that team
team.
won 50 games without him. And then, if you give Michael Jordan...
They did win 50 games without him that one season because they still had a lot of the same role players that did very well for them. They were coming off the championship win breeze, and they still had Scottie Pippen there. I'm not quite sure if I would rank Scottie Pippen within my top 10 of that era, just because, in my view, you have to be more than a sidekick to be within my top 10. But you could debate him there, of course, because at least Scottie led his team to the second round, and he was probably the greatest defensive small forward of all time. Scottie Pippen was great on both ends of the floor. But you can thank Michael Jordan for that, because Scottie Pippen developed into a player overall as what he was because of Michael Jordan. LeBron is not developing anyone into a great player. It's not happening.
A 50 fucking win team with
But keep in mind overall that, yes, they ended up winning about 50 games that year, the year that Michael Jordan left, and then the year after that, they were struggling, I believe, to make the playoffs. They were at about .500, and then Michael Jordan came back from baseball, overall, although he was clearly probably not in the same level of basketball shape as what he was, and he had won like 17 of their last 20 or 21 games, or 15 of their last 18 games, something like that, and then, of course, the next year, they were good for 72 games.
Out him. All right, so add LeBron to the Nuggets. What you think is going to happen?
Okay.
Exactly.
Right, but that's not like this dude actually believes that the Chicago Bulls overall were like this mega super team. They weren't. Once again, when you take a look at the Chicago Bulls, they had Horace Grant, they had B.J. Armstrong. Those guys were decent players. They weren't all-time great players. It just is what it is. Take a look at their stats. There's a reason why they only made one All-Star appearance, and really they should have not even made it that year. But because Michael Jordan was not there, and because of an absence of certain other stuff, overall they ended up making one All-Star appearance. When it came down to they were very vital role players, but they weren't all-time great talents. They weren't all-time great players. Like this guy's trying to act like this, has this mega super team. Like let's just stop.
Exactly. You can't add any great player.
Take a look at the statistics of the Chicago Bulls once again in the early 90s when they were winning those championships. Michael Jordan had one all-star level teammate. He had, Scottie Pippen. Horace Grant was very decent, but he wasn't all-star level. Take a look at the rest of that team and tell me that team is just one of the most talented teams that you've ever seen. It wasn't. What they had was a great system, and they had great coaching as well, and an all-time great player, and their players had roles. All right, so it actually speaks more to Michael Jordan's value and impact as a player that he was able to take those teams to 6 championships and win them all. Whereas LeBron James, he can have a multitude of players overall that were looked at as all-star potential, caliber players, without him. And then once he brings them on, he can't do as much with them as what was expected.
Win every championship with the Heat.
He wasn't always on the best team. He can't just be
added to a team and then...
And here comes the excuse for the LeBron James fan, overall. He wasn't always on the best team. Listen, at the end of the day, LeBron James, when you talk about the Miami Heat situation, he actually underwhelmed. He was supposed to win at least 3 out of 4 of those championships. He ended up winning 2, and he was lucky to win 2.
Just be the best, and
no,
he lost championships against Dirk fucking Nowitzki.
4 straight finals.
Did he win 4 straight?
Right, but who the hell was there other than the Boston Celtics in 2012 to really compete with them, dude? Like what? The Paul George Pacers, the Derrick Rose Bulls. Like no one gives a shit about those teams.
Finals like he should have.
You think he should have won?
Everybody thinks he should have fucking. What are you talking about? Of course he should have won.
I don't
Against
think
Dirk Nowitzki?
Well, first off,
Dallas?
That one maybe.
Dirk Nowitzki.
Of course, LeBron James should have won against the Dallas Mavericks and Dirk Nowitzki. You know, they only had one All-Star potential player on that team. The rest of them were very great role players, you know, and they could do their job. But they, in terms of talent, it wasn't even close. LeBron James had 3 top 10 players in the squad, including himself, Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade. You know, you of course were supposed to win that series, and LeBron James was the main reason why they lost that series. He was terrible.
They swept Kobe them. And Kobe was the return. Kobe went to the finals and won the year before that.
You cannot sit there and say that Dallas team was fire. That they should have beat fucking LeBron and the Heat and the team that they should have had.
That one, I think Miami should have won.
Not that year.
Y'all really believe that? That's crazy to me.
Like, this dude is such a fucking moron. Like, LeBron James fans actually believe overall that, like it was okay to lose that series. Like, dude, you had the clear talent advantage within your lineup. And then once again, I don't give him an excuse for 2014 or 2017 either. Like, if you're the most impactful or the most valuable player of all time, you at least make those series 6-game series. Like, he got his teeth kicked in by those guys. And he had Dwayne Wade. He had that of Chris Bosh on his team. You know, Mario Chalmers, I believe. You know, Ray Allen even a little bit when he was a bit older. You know, but still somewhat impactful as a role player. And you get your ass kicked by an older Spurs squad that, of course, obviously was flourishing. You know, they won the most amount of games that year. You know, but what does that state once again about Tim Duncan and the San Antonio Spurs? You know, that's why LeBron James, in my view, he's really not in the same conversation as Jordan or Russell or, you know, Kareem. He's really not in the same conversation as those guys. He's really in the same conversation as Bird, Tim Duncan, and Wilt Chamberlain. That's where he's at. Because when you talk about, you know, Wilt Chamberlain, he ended up winning 2 championships throughout his era where there really wasn't any free agency. You know, and on top of that, he was the most statistically dominant of his day. When you talk about Larry Bird, Larry Bird was able to take a 29-win team all the way up to a 60-win team within his first season and bring them to the Eastern Conference Finals. Then the next year win a championship. On top of that, he was greater than LeBron James offensively, you know, when it came down to it. Also in the clutch, also in terms of impact. Yes, you can certainly debate it. Magic Johnson, more championships. All right, you know, overall, and you can't state this bullshit about overall, you know, him, you know, not facing super teams because that was the era of super teams. Yes, Magic Johnson had a super team, but he also faced off against several super teams and beat them. All right, so it is what it is. You know, and of course you also have, you know, some other players that you might be able to debate as well. But that's why I state, you know, Tim Duncan, for example, Tim Duncan led his team to the playoffs every single year. Like, people always try to act like Tim Duncan, any player that especially was in the LeBron James era, people always try to state had these mega super teams. Take a look at Tim Duncan and the teams that he dragged to the finals in the early 2000s, and you tell me that was a super team with an older David Robinson and a Tony Parker and a Manu Ginobili. That was not a super team.
I'm a LeBron fan, but he should have won that series.
Take a look at the San Antonio Spurs, you know, at some of those championships, you know, and also some of the early 2000 seasons where Tim Duncan was winning over 50 games. Those were not super teams. I mean, you want to talk about a player that dragged the team overall, not having that much talent. Every time LeBron James, besides 2007, when he made the finals, had a decent amount of talent. You know, when you take a look at Tim Duncan, of course, he still had talent, but people try to act like it was this mega super team. No, it wasn't.
I will say this.
Do y'all
They just counted as a super team because they usually whoop LeBron James's ass.
believe Chris Bosh was better than Dirk Nowitzki?
No.
I don't think Chris Bosh is a Hall of Famer.
No. So y'all...
Well, then you're an idiot. Because anyone who makes 11 All-Star teams and wins a couple of championships, even as a third best piece, yes, they're a first ballot Hall of Famer. You know, but it is what it is. Anyways, you know, but I don't know why you would compare it like that. See, this dude is trying to compare it position by position, but at the end of the day, you can't always add it up like that. Because if we're going to do that, then, you know, we can do certain things like we can compare it, you know, position by position overall. You know, if it's ever so slightly more talented, sure, you can go by that. But at the end of the day, the talents of Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron James combined, they were supposed to be way more than enough to beat the Dallas Mavericks. Because the Dallas Mavericks overall, you can state all this stuff all you want to position by position, but why would you start off with Chris Bosh versus Dirk Nowitzki? You know, of course, you know, they played the same position, I believe. But it's like, why would you really compare it like that? Dirk Nowitzki was the best player on the team. LeBron James was the best player on the other team, at least allegedly. You know, so overall, you know, why would you not compare it like that? So then we also have to ask the question, who was the second player on the Dallas Mavericks that should have competed with the Miami Heat? Who really was as good as Dwayne Wade? The answer is nobody. And then what third player was as good as Chris Bosh? The answer was nobody. So yes, LeBron James should have clearly been winning that series, and he lost.
I don't think Chris Bosh is better. Okay. Do you believe that Joel Anthony was better than Tyson Chandler?
No.
I say even Steven.
Right, so here's my question overall from Mr. Ryan Davis. How many players, once again, because LeBron James is supposed to be greater than Dirk Nowitzki in that series. We all know that he wasn't. All right, so that's on LeBron James. So here's the question. Is Jason Terry, is Jason Kidd at that point in time in his career, is Tyson Chandler, is some of those other guys, are they better than what a Dwayne Wade was at that point in time in his career? The answer is no. All right, are any of those players greater than what Chris Bosh was at that point in time in his career? The answer is no. Okay? And then that's not even including some other role players like Mario Chalmers and some of the other guys that they had on there. So let's stop.
Joel Anthony.
All Tyson Chandler did was rebound and play defense.
Yeah, he won Defensive Player of the Year. He didn't just play defense. He was the best defender in the whole league. No, he just...
Well, at one point in time, he won Defensive Player of the Year, yes. But at the end of the day, once again, what also should be talked about is how LeBron James overall had Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, who, by the way, were both good two-way players. So, once again, with the team that had Dirk Nowitzki, Jason Terry, overall, and, Jason Kidd, J.J. Barea, like, come on. The Miami Heat should have won that series. But it just goes to show you how delusional the LeBron James fan base actually is.
Joel Anthony is not... Okay.
That's fair.
Is Jason Kidd better than old Mike Bibby at that time?
Definitely.
Definitely. So that's three players. That's three players on the starting lineup that's better for Dallas.
You just talked about LeBron being able to take anyone anywhere.
I said they went to the finals.
That Miami Heat team should have won against that Dallas.
Agreed. There's no pussyfooting away around that. Of course he's gonna try to, but yes, LeBron choked. It is what it is.
Team.
I just gave you how one starting lineup had three better players than the other starting lineup.
Talking
and
about?
you agreed. Do we want to go to the bench? Do we want to talk about who was on the bench on these
You
teams?
can talk about Dallas should not have won that fucking series.
Was not good. But that tells you how great.
Of course they were good. They had 3 of the top 10 best players in the league, and they had some very good role players. But that's how much of an idiot these LeBron James fans a lot of the times are. Like, they'll literally try to tell you that LeBron James was seriously out-talented against the Dallas Mavericks. Absolutely not.
LeBron and Dwayne Wade and them were because the niggas shouldn't even have been. How many teams have you seen?
The Miami team shouldn't have been in the finals.
Okay,
With
so should the
LeBron
Nets have won
and
the finals?
And these
Exactly.
cats.
So should the Nets have won the
Like, if we're really going to compare it, let's go to that 2017 series really quickly. Who do you think is greater in terms of LeBron James if we're going to compare it, between LeBron James and Kevin Durant for small forward? Okay, well, it's LeBron James, right? Okay, so then there's the advantage there. Point guard versus point guard. Stephen Curry versus Kyrie. Steph Curry has the advantage there. Overall, then when you compare other players overall, like Draymond Green and Kevin Love, overall, if we're just comparing, kind of talent for talent, when it comes down to it, who's really the better player there? I mean, some may debate Draymond Green, but to be quite honest with you, it's really debatable about who the better player is there. And then, you're not, Klay Thompson, of course, with some other players, he probably beats, his position. But, at the end of the day, then you're talking about other role players like J.R. Smith. You're talking about other players like Kyle Korver. You're talking about other players on that team, other good role players, Rodney Hood, other guys like that who actually at one point in time are very impactful with other teams, like the Portland Trailblazers and some other teams like the Milwaukee Bucks. Like I believe that George Hill was actually able to win the championship with Giannis Antetokounmpo. All right, so if we're going to go position by position at that point in time in their career, yeah, you can actually argue that the Cavaliers had more all-around talent than the 2017 Warriors. But then they won't debate that for that.
finals?
Because it's not really about your little role players. It's not really overall about the bench. Of course, that's a big part of it. They're essential pieces. But mainly how you win championships is about who are your best 1 or 2 players.
Hell nah.
Whenever the Nets got James Harden, Kevin Durant,
And yes, the Nets eventually should have been in the NBA Finals, but they had no leadership whatsoever. Kevin Durant is not a leader. He's been proven overall to be a guy that needs an all-time great player, like a Stephen Curry. one of the most impactful players of all time in order to even win an NBA Finals. Because Steph has won 2 without him. KD has never sniffed overall final success without that of Steph Curry. All right, and when I say final success, I'm talking about a championship, not just appearing there and getting beat within 5 games.
Fucking Kyrie Irving.
Absolutely.
See?
They should have won.
And how many
They should have
scenarios?
been there.
They
They
have
should have had a
talent.
fucking
They
better
should have
season
been
than
there. They
had.
should have been there.
How many scenarios have we seen where guys who have never played together come together and play together and win the finals? That's how great
The Golden State Warriors were expected to do it when they added Kevin Durant, and they had never played against each other. You know, the Boston Celtics in 2008, they were expected to do it. The Los Angeles Clippers, they got raked over the coals. You know, so did the Brooklyn Nets when Kevin Durant didn't win. He's been raked over the coals. So how come this is only an excuse of LeBron James?
LeBron James is. Y'all think some shit that never happens is supposed to happen with LeBron.
No, sir. When you end up picking the franchise that you're going to be on and you end up picking the roster and most of the time picking the coaches, then what does that mean? That pretty much means that you have everything that you want at your disposal. So why can LeBron James still not win?
You hold nobody else to that standard. Nobody else has gone to put multiple players together and immediately you thought they should win the finals.
Ryan.
But LeBron is so great, you go, well, he's supposed to do it. He's LeBron James.
I'm
That's
starting
what
to
you
think
did the same thing with
Ryan.
Michael Jordan.
Wait a second. What I just said don't make sense?
No, it makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
It makes sense, but I just, you know what it is for me? I just knew Mike had a killer instinct.
He
And that was
does.
something
But you
that
Right, no offense, dude, but you're a fucking airhead. Like, this dude overall, you know, like, he really overall shouldn't really be talking about this type of conversation.
What he
I
has to
understood.
he has to have the better team plus his killer instinct.
What does he have to
in
have?
order
Actually, no, sir. That's really more of LeBron James. Because if LeBron James doesn't have the better team, sometimes he'll even have the better team and he still won't win the series. As long as they're comparable in terms of talent, you know, and in terms of IQ. You know, LeBron James, once again, he's never won a finals overall to where overall he's just clearly been way out talented. It's never happened.
do it.
30, 20 years of top-notch nutrition and fitness
He could
and-
drag you to
and-
the Eastern Conference Finals, but he can't get you.
And keep in mind also that LeBron James had Eric Spoelstra, who eventually was proven to be one of the best coaches, if not right now the best coach within the whole entire NBA, and a disciple, you know, overall, and a student of that of Pat Riley, who's also another all-time great coach.
To the
So this argument about how LeBron James doesn't have all-time great coaching, all that is bullshit.
finals. He can't get you there.
LeBron been
without
there
the
10
best
times.
team.
I see what you
Yes, LeBron has been there 10 times, but let's be real. Who the hell did he have to face in the Eastern Conference? Like, I'm not stating that every single team that Jordan faced in the Eastern Conference was just absolute killers. But at least, like, the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics and the Detroit Pistons, you know, and overall, like, you know, even the New York Knicks, like, at least they were a little bit of a challenge. You know, even the Indiana Pacers with Reggie Miller and some of those other guys, like, at least they were, like, a little bit of a blockade. Like, LeBron James basically had a free, wide-open lane overall to go to the Eastern Conference Finals every year. Had he been in the Western Conference, we know for a fact that he wouldn't have made the finals because he got his teeth kicked in by the guys that would ever make it out of the Western Conference Finals usually.
Can't get you there.
I think it's a fair conversation.
Can I say
Yeah, he
Puerto
can't
Rico
get you
is
there.
the reason the Dallas Mavericks won
you,
the championship?
you bring this
No,
shit
no,
up. You bring this shit up every time.
Two reasons. Number one, JJ Barea is a bad motherfucker.
But they still had JJ Barea. They still had fucking I think Caron Butler was hurt, but they had Caron Butler.
Shawn Marion.
Sean Marion. They still had fucking Brennan Haywood off the bench. So that's two defensive centers.
Right, but bro, come on. Like, really? Like, we're bringing up little role players. Like, we're bringing up JJ Barea. Like this is the stupid shit that LeBron James actually, like, this is what they actually believe. Like, they love to state all this shit about how the 90s was trash, and then they'll sit around and try to tell you that JJ Barea was, like, this big, impactful player. Like, are you fucking kidding me? And don't get me wrong, JJ Barea, he had an impact on the team, but, like, dude, come on. Like, let's not sit here and act like JJ Barea was just this killer. Like, are you serious?
They had Peja Stojakovic. They still... Wait, did you scoff at fucking Hall of Fame Peja Stojakovic? This is crazy. Do you want me to read some Peja Stojakovic stats for you? This...
Right, but once again, this is all LeBron James fans know. They're like a computer. They can only read off of certain stats. You know, it's kind of like overall, once again, if you ask a computer, you know, a question, they can probably give you the most technical answer off of what seems like the best in terms of the surface area. But in terms of actual context, in terms of overall actual thinking and intelligent ability, they can't give you that. They can only give you what the surface level stats say, Because Peja Stojakovic at that point in time, like, he was done. Peja Stojakovic, he probably was a very good role player, but he was only averaging like 8 points per game that year. So it's like what point really overall does that really prove? Like that's me taking a look at LeBron James that 1 year with the Cleveland Cavaliers when he had Shaquille O'Neal and saying, how come LeBron James couldn't make the finals? Because he had Shaquille O'Neal that year, one of the all-time great players. Like, that's just stupid. Like, why would you even bring that up?
You've had this argument too many times to have all these stats in your phone.
Listen,
and secondly,
I don't have it on my phone, but I tell you, I'm a.
As you're looking it up, the second reason Puerto Rico is linked to the Dallas Mavericks is
here we go.
Carlos Arroyo was a starting point guard of the Miami Heat in the start of the season, and they cut him. He would have done better than Mike Bibby, I'll tell you that.
you guys are
Trash-ass Peja Stojakovic in his career averaged 20 points, 21 points, 19, 24, 20,
LeBron's
20.
10 championships,
But
just
listen,
like you said.
That's a lot, though.
He averaged.
Of course it's
he
a lot.
averaged that with Chris Webber on the team, Mike Bibby in his prime on his team, Bobby Jackson, 6th man of the year on his team.
Right. Peja Stojakovic overall is probably a Hall of Famer. At least I believe. Peja Stojakovic, of course, he was a very decent player. But at that time, he was not the same Peja Stojakovic. So you can bring up all the averages that you want to about his whole entire career. But this is also what LeBron James fans love to do. They love to bring up certain averages about a whole entire person's career and say, oh, well, that person was on this team. Right, but were they really the same player? Like Peja Stojakovic was averaging 8 points per game. Like, this is another player they love to do this with is Kawhi Leonard. When LeBron James ended up losing to the Spurs in 2014. Keep in mind that Kawhi that year was averaging like anywhere from 12 to 14 points per game, was not an all-star level player, and had never made an all-star team. So, I mean, to me, that point really is null and void.
The nigga had Vlade Divac on his team. The nigga had Brad Miller on his team. He had Gerald Wallace, who was blowing up on his team. It was a lot of people to score, and he still averaged 20 points a game. That nigga was
Right, so what did he average on the Dallas Mavericks?
a role player, way down the bench.
We don't have to talk about how more easy it is to score now than
This was
before,
20.
though.
This was 20.
that's
This was
different.
2011.
So
This was 2011. This ain't
Yeah.
2023.
I don't give a shit when it was. It's not 1996. It's not
and
1994.
You really got to start watching 96.
And the defense overall was better overall in that of the 90s as well. And that's also another part of the reason why triple doubles, why they're a little bit easier to accumulate, because the offensive statistics are inflated because of some of the defensive rule changes, which has led to some of the offensive impact, being higher, kind of similar overall to that of the 80s. But it is what it is. But yes, the defense overall was, better in the 90s. Now, was it like NFL football, like what a lot of people try to make it out to be? Like there was just tackles happening all the time? No. But at the end of the day, the 90s defense, yes, it was more of a defensive era.
94 ball. I've been making a point to watch it. That defense ain't nothing like you niggas trying to say it is. Niggas got open shots all the fucking time. All the time. And just because a nigga grabbed my jersey don't mean I still can't hit the shot, nigga, if I can shoot.
Ain't no Olay ass bullshit for sure.
So I wanted to find out if you really believed it. I believe you really believe it.
Oh, I believe LeBron James is the best player to ever touch a basketball. And it's not even close. It's not even close.
Well, no, LeBron James, when you talk about his talent level, he's not as talented as what Michael Jordan was. He's not as talented as what Larry Bird was. He's not talented as what Magic Johnson was, and probably all around as a player not as talented as what either Kareem or overall what Bill Russell was, and I don't have him over Bill Russell. I don't have him over Kareem. I don't have him over Michael Jordan. And for those of you that really know basketball, there's really no arguments for LeBron James to be over those players.
What can't he do?
No, he can do. Listen, LeBron is
Free throws is the best. That's all he did.
What LeBron James cannot do is take his teams overall to win consistently because he plays in way too much of a ball-dominant offense. That's the reason why LeBron James overall is 4-6 in the NBA Finals. Now, I don't blame him for every single year that he lost in the finals. In 2007, he kind of made it there a bit early, and they were not going to be able to compete with the Spurs, really. In 2015 against the Warriors, I get it. Kevin Love and Kyrie went down. I don't blame him too much for that. In 2018, of course, he had lost Kyrie Irving, so, they really had lost their second best player. So, I don't really blame him too much for those years. Of course, you could state that they all could have been more competitive if LeBron really was, quote-unquote, that impactful. But, that's a conversation for another time. But, the other years, like 2014, 2011, and 2017, yes, he does get the blame for that.
At worst, I'm putting him at 2 or 3.
Well, LeBron James is not at either 2 or 3, but it is what it is. Anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. I just thought that I would talk about that. I thought it was very particularly interesting. But like I said, LeBron James, all-time great basketball player, top 10 of all time. In my view, right there with Bird, Tim Duncan, and Wilt Chamberlain. Is he there? Is he there with Michael Jordan? No. Is he there with Bill Russell? No. Is he there with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? No. I think the highest that you could debate LeBron James is maybe with Magic Johnson. And to be honest with you, I don't even think that he's right there with Magic Johnson. Just in my personal view. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see where this goes. We'll see if I do another conversation on it, but that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.